All right. We won't be playing the song again because we don't violate copyright here. Hi, everybody. Godfrey Plata, he, him, his, Deputy Director at LA Forward Institute. We are here because we are excited to get the word out to vote yes on Measure A, which is on a ballot that will hit our mailboxes as soon as October 7th. And you can vote yes on Measure A all the way through November 5th. A little bit about LA Forward Institute for those of you who are newer to our community. That's exactly what we are. We're a community of people who understand that we don't really live in a real democracy unless we know more about it and have the skills and context to be able to partake in it. And so here we are today, awakening our own knowledge and ability to spread the word about a particular affordable housing measure that will be on the ballot again in just the next 2 months or so. We don't cover just housing at LA Forward Institute. We follow the lead of our community members to be able to engage on issues that you all want to lead into. So I spent hours today on unarmed crisis response. I spent hours on Sunday on climate justice. So like you all have interest in how to make this a better county, city, and world. We are here to support you to make it that better place that we can all make it. Today's agenda, we are joined today by two representatives of the Measure A campaign who can give us the basics. If we don't know what Measure A is, we're here to learn the basics. We'll have an opportunity to do some Q&A, so my colleague Allison is going to help me collect questions in the chat box. And so after we do some really basic Measure A getting to know you kinds of things, I'm going to ask Allison to see if there are any questions that came up in the chat box. Maybe there won't be because it'll be so clear. But if not, we'll totally use some time to answer those questions. And then our guests from the campaign will share ways to help. And then we're going to take some time to practice a little bit of like, oh, what are some of the questions we might be asked by folks who want to engage about Measure A? What are some key talking points? We're here to train to be ambassadors as well. And then finally, because LA Forward Institute is not a one issue place, we are going to share a couple of other things that might be interesting to you at the end of this call. So we'll be done by 8 p.m. by the time there may be speeches and things on TV that you are trying to catch. So thank you for spending some time thinking locally with us. I'm going to go ahead and pass things to our first speaker, Andrea Vokos at United Way. I'm going to spotlight you.
Oh my God. Thank you, Godfrey. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrea Vokos. I'm the Housing Coalitions Manager with United Way of Greater Los Angeles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm super excited to share a bit with you all on Measure A today. Yeah, super proud. So over 400,000 signatures were collected to get this onto the ballot this November. And we had folks from all walks of life collecting. We had labor, we had homeless service providers, we had community members, we had folks with lived experience. And so I'm just so proud of all of the hard work that everyone's done. And yeah, let's get into it. Oh, next slide. Sorry. Thank you. Oh no, sorry, go back. I jumped ahead, sorry. But the next one, yes, there we go. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, amazing. And yes, as Godfrey said, this is the first time that a citizen-led initiative countywide measure is going to be on the ballot, and so this is really, really exciting. So Measure A is a measure that was put together and created by community experts, folks with lived experience, and not written by politicians. And essentially what it's doing is a repeal and replace of Measure H, but then a lot more. And so essentially it's keeping the things that have been working well with Measure H, but then improving and addressing the gaps that were there in place. And so if there's anything that you walk away remembering today after this presentation, it should be these three main things. It's that this is going to build more housing we can afford. It's going to create more mental health care and also more accountability as well, with a huge, 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 huge emphasis on prevention, on homelessness prevention. You can go to the next slide. So we've learned quite a few things since Measure H passed, since the previous voter initiative passed. we've learned that a lot of people have been ending their homelessness. I'm sure folks have seen the recent homeless count and have seen that there's actually been a decrease in the first time in, I believe, 6 years. And I think that a huge part of that is thanks to the work of Measure H. And we've seen over 100,000 people end their homelessness permanently, and that's more than the amount of folks that fit into either the Rose Bowl or the SoFi Stadium. So it's quite a bit of people. But at the same time, we're still not investing enough countywide to prevent homelessness. Less than 4% of the county budget goes towards prevention. And we've actually seen huge reductions and cuts to the budget, where we've seen over $350 million cut from the budget for homeless services. We're seeing that we have almost 7,000 offline long-term board and care beds, and that's simply because there's a lack of sustainable funding to be able to operate those beds. And we're still over half a million units short of affordable housing across the county. Next slide, please. And we're learning that also one single city can't solve the crisis that we have in the county of the large amounts of homeless populations that we have across the county and of people falling into homelessness. This is something that's been fragmented and it really needs to be addressed countywide. And we've learned that we really need new approaches to finance housing so that we can build much faster and for much less cost. So by using just single sources for financing, that would be able to build a lot at a lower amount. And we've also learned that it's important to have dedicated permanent revenue to be able to do this work, because this is critical, important work that's going to take a long time, and we need to be able to fund the work to do that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there have been great things that have come from Measure H. And in addition to the over 100,000 folks that have ended their homelessness permanently, we also have 35,000 people across the county that are receiving either housing or services thanks to Measure H. So the thing with Measure H is that it's going to sunset in 2027, meaning that it's going to be ending, the funding will be ending. And if we don't take action now, those 35,000 folks in the county are going to be losing their housing and or services that they're receiving as well. And experts also say that there would be an increase of 25% homelessness across the county as well. That's so many more unnecessary, needless deaths happening. Those are our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones, and we can't let that happen. Next slide, please. So what is this measure going to be doing? So it's going to be doing quite a few things. You can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned previously, this is going to be increasing more mental health treatment. So with this measure, it's going to be connecting folks that are either with serious mental illness or that have substance use disorders that are currently living on the streets, connecting them with effective treatment. It's also going to be helping making housing much more affordable. So in addition to increasing the amount of affordable housing units that we have across the county, it's also going to be converting already existing affordable housing. It's going to be converting naturally occurring affordable housing as well. It'll be extending covenants, purchasing buildings as well to add and create to the stock as well. It's additionally going to be preventing homelessness. So there's going to be a huge increase in the investment in emergency rental assistance. As I mentioned previously, it's going to be preserving the services that have been saving lives that people have been receiving as well. And a huge, huge part to this is that there's going to be strong accountability. So there are legally required goals that have to be met, and there are consequences if those goals are not met. And that's going to be overseen by a citizen oversight committee. You can go to the next slide. And another important thing to know with this is that this measure is going to be supporting workers in several ways. So in addition to creating well-paying union jobs to be able to construct the housing that we need, it's also going to be providing well-paying, dignifying wages for our workers that are working on the ground and doing this important work. And we found that since payment and funding has been so unsustainable, that a lot of folks have a lot of folks that are service providers have been at risk of themselves falling into homelessness as well if they haven't yet. And that's also something else that's really important to keep in mind. You can go to the next slide. And I'll pass it over to Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andrea. My name is Kristen Astor. I'm the Director of Public Policy with the People Concern. We're one of the largest homeless services providers in LA County, and we've been doing this work for over 60 years. We do everything from working with our neighbors experiencing homelessness, doing outreach on the streets, to supporting our community members in permanent supportive housing. And I'm really proud to say that 92% of the people we support in permanent housing never experience homelessness again. And we are one of the many organizations that are really proud to endorse Measure A. You can go to the next slide. So Measure A, for the first time, creates legally required goals that we have to meet to permanently end homelessness here in LA County and make housing more affordable for everyone. So this is a huge departure from Measure H. There are currently no required goals with Measure H. And so this measure really carefully constructs goals with metrics that will be established with clear deadlines. We're going to have strict accountability to show that the programs that have the most effective outcomes, there can be funding shifted to those programs. And we're really focused on having a standardization of care across programs to ensure those outcomes. Go to the next slide. So what are the 5 legally required goals under this measure? First is what we want to increase the number of people permanently leaving homelessness here in LA County. Second, we all know that we want to have a community that everyone can enjoy, and that no one deserves to live on the streets in an encampment or in an unsheltered situation. That's not good for anyone. And so we want to make sure that we are increasing the number of people permanently moving from encampments into permanent housing. We want to increase the overall number of affordable housing units in LA County to address that 500,000 shortfall that we have. And we know that none of us want to see our community members who are living with mental illness or substance use disorders living on the streets and suffering and dying on the streets. And so this measure requires a reduction in the number of people with mental illnesses or substance use disorders experiencing homelessness. And we really want to solve the root of this issue. So we require that we are reducing the number of people falling into homelessness. Next slide. So how will the funding be used? So it is estimated that this ballot measure will generate about $1.2 billion every year to address affordable housing throughout LA County and to provide vital services to our community members experiencing homelessness. So in terms of how it breaks down, 60% of the funding will go to homeless services and mental health programs. So this essentially safeguards the current resources that we have that Andrea mentioned would otherwise expire in just a couple of years, and then also increases those resources given the current state of the crisis that we're in. And so these services go to things like street outreach, supporting folks in interim housing, providing vital mental health services, providing case management while folks are in permanent housing, helping support our residential care facilities, and a whole host of other vital services. Within that pot of funding, 15% of those resources will go to cities. So that is also a huge departure from Measure H. We know that our city partners have a vital role to play in having the strategies that will best serve their local communities. But there is no guaranteed funding in Measure H for cities. And that was a big part of the learning and feedback we heard as we worked with many partners to craft this measure. So only in the last few years half cities, either directly or through groups called councils of governments, have started to receive some of the Measure H dollars from LA County Board of Supervisors. And this measure locks in that 15% of the homeless services dollars will go to cities and ensure that that funding is also part of regional strategies and approaches. We have dedicated resources for accountability and data and evaluation, which also doesn't exist under Measure H. There was no dedicated line item for data, and while the Homeless Initiative has done an amazing job collecting data and sharing, we know we need more of that. We need stronger accountability. We need to really know it works, and we need everyone to have access to that data. And so this locks in funding for that. And then we have 40% of the resources for affordable housing development, preservation. So we're actually losing many of the scarce affordable housing units that we have. So this provides resources for that. And then locks in funding for the first time, a guaranteed source of funds for vital rental assistance and support and eviction protection and other really important components. I will note as well, since this is a train the trainer, one thing to note is that we really thought about, because this is an ongoing measure, how to make sure we have the flexibility over time to address evolving needs. So we will for sure have that 50% of funding for homeless services. And we will also for sure have dedicated set of resources for affordable housing. And there's a flexible 10% built in there that after 5 years, we can see where the needs are the greatest. So right now we know we're in the throes of a huge homelessness crisis. As we make progress on this issue over time, that 10% of funds can shift to where the resources are most needed over time. So there is that flexibility baked into the measure. Next slide. So in terms of the funding source for this measure, so as Andrea mentioned, this measure repeals and replaces the current quarter-cent sales tax that we have to fund homeless services. And it replaces it with a half-cent sales tax. So what that will mean for most folks is a quarter-cent sales tax increase from the status quo. There are a few cities that aren't currently paying into Measure H. And so those cities, which you can see here on the slide, will experience it as a half-cent sales tax. But for most communities across LA County, folks will experience a quarter-cent sales tax increase from the status quo, which for an average household equates to about $5 a month. For a low-income household, equates to about $2.50 a month. And the sales tax is going to apply to the essentials such as gas, medication, groceries, rent, diapers, and other vital necessities. Next slide. So in terms of our supporters, we're really proud that over 130 organizations and individuals have supported the measure. You can go to the next slide. And this list continues to grow. This was as of June. We continue to add new endorsements all the time, every single day, in fact. And it really reflects the broad base of support that we have for this measure, from business to public safety, to service providers, to labor partners, to housing developers, to elected officials, and many, many more. We really see faith leaders, a broad base of support for this measure. Next slide. So with that, I'll stop. I see there's already some questions coming into the chat, but I'll turn it back over to you, Godfrey, for where we want to go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And where we go from here is exactly that, Q&A. And I think I have seen a stream of questions come through. Allison, do you know if, what the first question might have been, just to make sure in case we missed it in the stream?
Yeah, actually, good evening, everyone. Allison Henry, the San Gabriel Valley lead organizer for LA Forward. Thank you, Kristen and Andrea, for a great presentation. The first question came in kind of early, and it was, what does tax threshold mean? There was some confusion over what that meant and how that works. So what do we mean by tax threshold?
I know I could actually use a little bit more clarity on the question.
I was about to
Um,
say.
so Celine, if you don't, if you feel comfortable coming off mute or putting it in the chat, would love to get a little bit more clarity.
Oh, yeah. So I was reading about Measure A online, and it was saying like one of the key things is that it lowers the tax threshold to be able to deploy funds, which keeps like corporate interest out of it as far as affordable housing.
That might be about Proposition 5 at a state level, is what that one
Oh.
sounds like. I just want to double check though, in case there is like, if you find the article, like maybe it would be helpful for us, but
mean,
it might be a state proposition, California State Proposition 5.
That totally could be, because if you guys are confused, then I must be confused.
I think that sounds right, Godfrey. Thanks for, no, and it's an excellent question. There are many issues that voters will have the chance to vote on this fall. And I think it's a great point anyway, that because this is a citizens initiative, the threshold to pass this ballot measure is 50% plus one. So Measure H was put on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors back in 2017. So 2/3 of voters in LA County supported Measure H. And the Citizens Initiative, though, only requires 50% plus one. So that state ballot measure that you're talking about is pertaining more to, when government officials put measures on the ballot, but this is a Citizens Initiative. So it's a great question.
And just to make sure folks know what Celine is referring to with Proposition 5, there's a Proposition 5 for all Californian voters, where if you voted yes on it, what it would do is lower the voting threshold necessary in order to pass things like Measure H, which the County Board of Supervisors put on the ballot directly. You wouldn't need 2/3 of a vote or 66%. You would need about 55% of a vote. And so it lowers the threshold, meaning it could be easier for the public in various places to be able to vote through things like affordable housing funding, et cetera, in those circumstances. But in this case, because as Kristen said, citizen-led measure, 50% plus one is what we need for this particular measure. But lots of housing things on the ballot, which is, I think, also why it's confusing. Allison, could you point us to the second question that you saw in the chat box, please?
Yes. So the second question, what is one thing individuals as opposed to governments, as opposed to groups or organizations can do to spread the word about Measure A? So what is one thing individuals as opposed to groups or orgs can do to spread the word about Measure A?
Yeah, there's a few different ways actually. So one easy thing would be to follow the Bold New Way on social media, because you can share posts on social media to do that. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook if you do at the Bold New Way. Also, additionally, I'm hosting bi-weekly presentations as well on Measure A, so you can always invite folks to that. Oh, okay, thank you, awesome. That's another key way as well if you wanted to invite folks, and you'll also see promotions for those on social media as well. But those are some really good ways to spread the word. Also, if you end up endorsing as an individual, you can also share the endorsement form as well with friends and with folks as well in your respective circles. Yeah, do you have any additional suggestions, Kristen, as well?
I think you got it. But yeah, we want to spread the word far and wide. And so please do share this information with those in your community. And if you sign up to get those updates, you'll, I think, get up to speed on when there's opportunities to volunteer and share things on social media as well.
Yeah, and actually, I also forgot to mention that I'm going to be, well, I guess we're kind of doing it right now, but or we'll be doing this afterwards, but I'm going to be leading 2 Train the Trainer sessions, one on Thursday and this Thursday and one next Tuesday. So if you want even more time to be able to like dig in deeper, if you're interested in presenting, or if you just want to feel much more confident in being able to field questions, you can register for either of those. So I can paste the information into the chat as well for that.
Thanks, Andrea. Allison, take it away again. Thanks.
Sure. The next question we have, who at LA County will be the administrator of the funds? And what is the role of LASA after the measure gets passed?
Yeah, great question. I'm happy to take it to start. So, yeah, great question. We get this question a lot. So, there essentially will be two main administrators of the funds. So, for the homeless services funding, like now, the County Homeless Initiative proposes the budget every year for the homeless services dollars. And that budget is ultimately decided by the LA County Board of Supervisors. So, for example, right now, the LA County Homeless Initiative is doing something like 20 listening sessions to help inform their budget process for the year ahead. And there'll be a many month-long community engagement process and stakeholder process to shape those funding decisions. So they will be the administrator, with the LA County Board of Supervisors being the ultimate decider on the homeless services dollars. On the affordable housing production, protection, and rental assistance dollars, the LA County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency will be the administrator of those funds. So if you haven't heard of this agency, it is the first ever countywide agency focused on affordable housing that was created by state legislation a couple of years ago. Some of you probably were involved in that effort. It was by La Casa. And they have a 21 member board that will administer those dollars. And there's the state legislation created a lot of the parameters for how those funds will be spent. And again, this 21 member board includes subject matter experts, folks with lived expertise, representative from cities, counties. So it's a really comprehensive body. And in terms of the role of LASA, LASA will be an administrator of funds in as much as the county uses LASA to implement county directed programs. So LASA won't be the decision maker of the dollars. The county is the decision maker, and then often uses LASA to then help like as a grant administrator to implement those funds. And so that is what LASA's role will be. Andrea, would you add anything to that?
No, that was perfect. And actually, I meant to add to the previous question as well. You can volunteer to phone bank and text bank. And if you visit yesona.la, you can go and click on sign up and you can get connected with the official campaign. But no, for this specific question, I think you nailed it.
Great, thank you. The next question, half cent means 0.5% or 0.5 cents flat per purchase?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, a clarity question.
Yeah, 0.5%. So the actual amount will vary by the size of the purchase.
A tag along question, are there exemptions of items from that tax?
Yeah. So many of the basic essentials of everyday life, like groceries, diapers, rent, gas, etc., will be exempt from that sales tax.
Yeah, it's, I believe, like roughly 75% of like average daily spending that folks do is not going to it's not going to be applicable for this tax.
Thank you. We've got 3 more questions to go. So next question about how we define affordable housing. And the question comes with some context from our friends. So how do we define affordable housing? My only experience with affordable housing has been the city of Santa Monica offering me a BMR loft for $2,200 based on my under $70,000 salary. So you want to talk about what affordable housing means and what's used to calculate that?
Andrea, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So just to put it simply, it's essentially like an income category. So you take the area media income and you categorize in a lower income bracket for affordable housing. So for example, for some folks, if you're unable to spend more than 30% of your income, things like that, those would be in a very general sense, that's what that would be the definition for affordable housing. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Kristen.
I would just add that we all feel and experience the impacts of our housing shortfall, right? And the more that we have more housing, the greater ability that we'll be able to have access to housing that we can all afford. And so that's also a key component, is that by building more housing and making sure we can protect the affordable housing that we have, that the goal is that housing becomes more affordable across all income levels. And that impacts all of us. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. And in addition to, you know, being a benefit for all income levels, it's also for all document status levels as well, because all of the services and housing and everything would be, you'd be eligible whether, no matter what your documentation status is. So that's also something that's, I think, really key, really important, and I think like really beautiful as well.
Yeah. Unlike federal resources, which have much more strict requirements on things like your immigration status and other components, these are local dollars that are really flexible, that we have local control with how they're used based on our values here in LA County. And we all see the challenges with getting access to the federal resources that we need. And so this really protects, for the first time ever, our ongoing locally controlled dollars for these vital issues that we get to decide how they're used.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that really informative answer. The next question, can you go into more detail of the 11% for renter support? So the 11% of funds raised, I suppose, that goes for renter support.
Yeah. And I think this relates to another question I saw around prevention as well. There was, just to put a little bit of context, so last year, the most comprehensive study on homelessness in the history of California was released. And it showed that for a majority of folks who fell into homelessness for the first time, that they said if they had just access to $200, $300 more a month, that they could have stayed housed. And we know beyond the human tragedy of homelessness that it is far, far less expensive to help keep someone in their apartment, keep someone in their home, than to bring someone out of homelessness and all of the trauma and ongoing support that can be required after that oftentimes. And so we're really excited about this component for rental assistance. We know there is such a huge need to keep folks in their homes, and it's a win-win, right? It keeps folks in their homes. It helps stabilize our housing market. We know there's a lot of mom and pop landlords out there as well, right? Who maybe rent out a unit. So this really helps benefit everyone. And in particular, we know that our older adults are the fastest growing population experiencing homelessness here in California. People don't realize that 48% of people experiencing homelessness in California are over the age of 50. And that, our older adults in particular often have more stable incomes and can't often weather whether it's a medical emergency or a family crisis or some other financial shock. And so this is a really key component that we know will help prevent homelessness and provide a vital lifeline to folks throughout LA County. Andrea, what would you add?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so sorry, I saw the excited response in the chat. It is a big deal. So yeah, I mean, in addition to the older population, which is like the most rapidly growing population in the unhoused population in LA County. Another thing that I think is really important with this is the intersection with racial justice and environmental justice as well. In the county, we see overrepresentation of certain communities. Black folks make up 8% of the county, whereas make up 34% of the unhoused population across the county. The Latino community is a rising population in the unhoused community across the county, making up about, I believe, 40% or so. And a lot of this is, of course, unfortunately due to racist practices of redlining throughout our history. And so in addition to addressing the varying wage levels that we have just based off of, frankly, a racist society that we live in, something that's really important as well to note is that the funding for La Casa with this is also going to be addressing that racial injustice, in the sense that one of the core tenets of La Casa is also addressing the lack of affordable housing in high resource areas. And there's also would be a huge investment in financing along transit corridors as well. And so I think that it touches upon this through the emergency rental assistance and also in just funding things like La Casa as well. So this is impacting so many different communities, and it would be helping so many different communities. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We just had one last question, and I think Kristen or Andrea, you maybe noted it already. And I'll pose it as it was written in the text or the chat. This person's curious what the pipeline looks like in terms of existing people falling into homelessness or currently experiencing it and getting housing under the status quo versus what it would look like once the measure is passed.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the last data that we have indicates that while we're currently housing a little over 205 folks a day, that over 225 people fall into homelessness every single day. And so as we look out into our communities and we continue to see folks living on the streets and in encampments or in their cars and other situations, we see that tragedy every day. And people are getting housed every single day. At my agency, I literally get an email every single day of someone that has been permanently housed as a result of these services, but more people are falling into homelessness. And Measure H has never had a prevention strategy. There were very little resources, less than 3% dedicated to prevention. And so we're really excited that this measure takes a really holistic approach to both, of course, providing vital services, but really addressing prevention and really helping folks not fall into homelessness. And so that is a big difference and something we're really excited about with the measure.
Thanks so much, Elle, for answering focused questions. Thank you for Allison, Allison for keeping track of what was asked in the chat box. We have a few more things left. We're going to just recap really quickly those ways to help, but then we're also going to position you to be able to anticipate the most frequently asked questions around this as well. So I'm going to pass things back to Kristen and Andrea to just recap all of that.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, as I mentioned previously, a really great thing would to be following the Bold New Way on social media. You'll be able to stay up to date. You'll be able to share information with folks within your circles. And again, it's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, things like that. I'd also highly encourage signing up for updates with the campaign if you visit yesonaid.la. And that's where you'd be able to sign up if you're interested in volunteering as well. And we're going to be pretty soon ramping up our direct voter contact and voter engagement, starting most likely in early September. And so that's going to be something really exciting to do. But right now, our main priority is doing what we're doing right now, is providing voter education and also getting folks to train as well and to teach others as well, and seek endorsements as well, and just really just letting folks know that not only is this going to be on the ballot in November, but to vote yes on it as well. And then so if you're interested in voter engagement with things like phone banking, text banking, canvassing, there's that option. And then we're also going to be doing get out the vote efforts in the final weeks before the election as well, just to remind folks that haven't voted yet to vote. So those are quite a few ways to help. You can also give individual donations if you'd like, if you feel compelled to, at yesonaid.la as well. So there's that option also if you'd like. But yeah, So we're gonna do a little role playing right now where I'm gonna ask Kristen some common questions that folks have when hearing about this. And yeah, well, let's see what Kristen has to say, and we'll all learn from this little role play. So Kristen, why hasn't there been more progress on homelessness? Wasn't there this like Measure H thing?
Yeah, great question. And I know we talked about this just a minute ago, but to say that we are housing people every single day as a result of these vital services. Over the last few years, we have permanently housed over 100,000 people, which is a huge success. But unfortunately, what we see in our community is that more and more people are falling into homelessness every day. So that while we are housing people, more people are falling into homelessness than we're able to house. And so that lack of ability to really address prevention of homelessness has been a reason why we continue to see visibly homelessness in our community. But this year, we are starting to see progress. For the first time in years, the number of overall folks experiencing homelessness has declined in LA County and in the city of LA. We're seeing more folks in particular go into shelters. So we are making progress. But in particular, in order to really solve homelessness, we have to address prevention. And that's something that this measure will do for the first time.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So with that, it sounds like maybe, is this a little different? What's the difference between Measure A and Measure H? How are they different?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences. So this measure really takes the lessons learned from what worked and what needs to be improved from Measure H. So a few key things. For one, this is written by community experts. It is citizen led and community driven. It has legally required goals to end homelessness, prevent homelessness, and other key components. It has strong data and accountability requirements written in the measure with legally enforceable shifts across funding. It also, for the first time, helps ensure that we have a body that includes the city of LA, County of LA, small cities, and others who are coming together to work together on shared regional goals. It funds homelessness prevention and affordable housing for the first time. It ensures our cities have access to resources that they need, and so much more. So again, it really builds off of the lessons that we've learned and creates a comprehensive, holistic path forward.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I heard something about a sales tax, like a half-cent sales tax. How is this funding going to be used? Do you know who decides how the money is going to be used?
Yeah. So that half-cent sales tax will generate an estimated $1.2 billion every single year to permanently fund funding for affordable housing and for access to mental health and other vital homeless services. So in 60% of the dollars will fund vital services such as street outreach, interim housing, permanent housing, mental health care services, and so many other services. And those dollars will be administered by the LA County Board of Supervisors with input from the community. And then 40% of the dollars will be used on affordable housing production, preserving and protecting the affordable housing that we have, and then also dedicated funding for rental assistance throughout LA County. And the LA County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency, La CASA, which is governed by a 21-member body, will decide how those resources are administered. And I will also mention that helping guide the implementation of the homeless services dollars is a new group called the Executive Committee on Regional Homeless Alignment, which has county, small city, city of LA for the first time at the table together and advised by a leadership table of community experts, business partners, labor partners, people with lived experience, service providers, key agencies to also shape implementation to make sure everyone is on the same page.
Wow, okay, that's really cool to know. So you mentioned things about these committees, like are they making sure that, the funding is being used well? Yeah, can you tell me more about the accountability with this?
Yeah. So accountability, we all want to see more accountability and transparency and oversight. And so this measure has extremely high um, safeguards written in for all of those key components. So one, for the first time ever, we have legally enforceable goals around homelessness, around decreasing the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, decreasing the number of people who have a serious mental illness or substance use disorder experiencing homelessness, ensuring people are permanently leaving encampments into permanent housing, increasing the overall supply of affordable housing in LA County. And these are goals that have to be met in the ballot measure. There are specific metrics that have to be decided with goals for 5, 10, and longer term periods. And there is funding for data and evaluation to track so that we can all see how the funds are being used, how is it being used most effectively. And based on those metrics that are decided, those programs that aren't meeting their required metrics can have their funding shifted away to more effective programming. So we have real goals, we have data, we have evaluation of what works, and we have regular audits and citizen input throughout to ensure that we're using these resources in the most effective way possible.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of accountability.
Well, these are our resources, and so we have a right to know that they're being used in the most effective way possible, and to make sure that that we're really solving this issue in our community.
I totally agree. That's awesome. And yeah, I heard Measure H is ending. What? But I heard that this doesn't end. Why does the funding not expire?
Well, as my assistant can help inform us, so yeah, Measure H, if nothing were to happen in just a couple of years, we would see, unfortunately, 35,000 people who are currently receiving services be at risk of losing their housing and other vital services. So this measure does not expire and ensures that we have, for the first time ever, ongoing funding that we can count on for affordable housing and homeless services. We have a shortage of over 500,000 affordable homes in LA County, and it is going to take ongoing resources and dedication to ensure that we can get out of this housing crisis for good. And we know with 75,000 experiencing homelessness here in LA County, that we need to know that we have the resources in place to innovate, to provide effective ongoing services to our community members experiencing homelessness. It also, by having this ongoing source, ensures that, for example, like the LA County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency can potentially bond on that those dollars in the future, which helps make those dollars stretch even further. So we're really excited that we'll be able to count on these resources. There are no other resources that we can count on year after year. And so this would be the first time ever that we would have this resource that we can all count on.
Wow, this sounds great. I'm going to vote yes on it. Yeah, thank you everyone for being a part of this role play with us. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, Kristen's assistant. So I believe this next slide will be our final slide. So these are just some key top talking points that we have to take away from today. So these are the key things. So remember, this is going to be, Measure A is going to be providing more affordable housing. It's going to be providing more mental health care. It's going to be increasing much more accountability. There's a huge emphasis on homelessness prevention. And this is also a really key difference among the other differences between this and Measure H. as Kristen and her assistant so beautifully explained just now, this is a permanent fund, which is going to be so crucial for the work that lays ahead of us. There are also legally required outcomes and goals that need to be met. This will be the first time that there'd be a countywide legally required goal to reduce homelessness, which is really key. For programs that are not reaching the metrics and deadlines and goals, there are financial consequences where funding would then be reallocated. So yeah, thank you so much to everybody for being on this call and learning with us. I really appreciated it. Thank you so much. This has been really incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea and Kristen and Kristen's assistant for modeling for us how we talk about this, even while you're juggling many other things in life on a Tuesday evening as well. There is one more question in the chat box about any common positions of opposition to this. If there's any guidance around that, just like we'll take that as like one more thing before we jump to some very final next step. Anything about opposition, just common opposition that you all want folks to know about?
I mean, I think some common things we hear is kind of like the question that surfaced today, right? We all continue to see the tragedy of homelessness in our community and this feeling like, why do we still see this issue? And so I think definitely talking about the prevention component and why we have been successful, that we just really can't keep up with the number of folks falling into homelessness, I think has been one of the biggest areas.
Thanks so much, Kristen. I feel like your assistant is your magical wizard's hat almost for this. I hope everyone gets one as a result of that. Everyone deserves an assistant as they have Measure A conversations. This assistant that we're going to provide you all is a video so you can refresh your memories from today's conversation. Again, at LA Forward Institute, we're here to support our activation in our local democracy, including on the ballot and off the ballot. And so here are just some things coming up as we approach the end of the month. Actually, next, it's not on here, but next Monday, we're having, if you go to laforward.org/calendar, we're having a teach-in from 6 to 7 p.m. virtually on just the basics of affordable housing development. We can all be like, rah, rah, let's get affordable housing, but we don't even know how it's developed. Like, how does one get access to land, finance it? How does the construction piece work? Why does this take so long? So literally just the process of building out and developing affordable housing is something we want our people to know about. And so join us next Monday at 6 p.m. on August 26th. You can RSVP for that at the laforward.org/calendar. We cover lots of things that aren't housing related. So we have a community meeting on the 12th where you'll be able to hear about the vast majority of projects and workshops we are running currently. That is also virtual. Thank you so much, Allison. Allison, who's been supporting a lot of the Q&A tonight and the link putting into the chat box, runs a housing academy in the San Gabriel Valley to support folks to activate in their communities. And our San Gabriel Valley residents in that academy are presenting their ideas to accelerate affordable housing production and affordable housing in general in the SGV on the 21st. We will feed you if you come and listen to their ideas, right? These are community generated ideas and initiatives where people are going to be pitching things that need to happen in their communities, and they need support from folks like yourselves. And then lastly, as we approach the election, there's going to be lots of things related to the election. So we're going to have a teach-in on the different ballot measures on the 23rd. We're going to be having some forums alongside our allies at Housing Now, where we ask really important questions about housing policy to state assembly people, legislative folks who do their work in Sacramento. So TBA on that. But many other things that we're juggling. Those are just a selection of them. If you want to keep up with us, feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook as well. And the easiest way to continue supporting this work is to become a member of the LA Forward community for literally like $1 a month or more. You can help support this work and just make sure we're getting the word out there to folks like yourselves. Lots of ballot parties, Allison says. Yes, there's lots lots of ballot measures. And if you want someone to just talk through them with, we're going to be at bars, restaurants, parks, etc., all over the county throughout the month of October and into November to make sure that folks get the answers that they need to feel more confident as voters. So thanks again to our guests tonight, Andrea and Kristen. Again, this is like after hours as we're juggling. You all are as well as audience members. You may be running to the TV or whatever it is that you're doing in addition tonight. It's also okay to not watch anything on TV and just go do your thing. Eat, take care of yourself, take a shower, do whatever. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time at LA Forward Institute. Bye, y'all.